They're back on the mic, just two sexy guys, bringing stories that'll open your eyes. This ain't the main show, it's a little surprise, extra thoughts that didn't quite materialize. It's the bonus, baby, don't you miss this vibe. Extra tales and facts that didn't make the ride. Still so juicy, still so real. Two sexy guys with that bonus appeal.
Okay, we've got bonus content about air travel. And just to pull back the veil for a second, I told Mark privately that in addition to answering his question about the airline's failing business model, I had also done research into a couple of additional topics looking both backward about what air travel used to be like in the good old days before deregulation, and forward about what we might see in the way of technology innovations in the future. Airline travel didn't used to be so miserable. Those of us old enough to have flown in airplanes prior to 9/11 are not imagining how cramped and uninviting they've become. Average legroom has shrunk several inches and may soon exceed the limit of human endurance. There's no room for your bag in those overhead compartments, so you shove it under the seat in front of you, which only exacerbates the legroom problem. Meals aren't served anymore, even on long routes. And that's just what's happening inside the plane. Outside, the security procedures are more invasive and take much longer than they used to. As the New York Times reported, quote, before 9/11, boarding a plane required nothing more than walking through a metal detector. Now the experience can include taking off your shoes and your belt, placing electronics into separate bins and travel-sized liquids into see-through plastic bags. Full-body scanners and other advanced screening tools are in operation alongside pat-downs, armed pilots, and air marshals, end quote. That creates longer lines, and to add insult to injury, we're getting nickel and dimed with nuisance fees for everything. Indeed, the entire experience of flying is more stressful from the time you set out for the airport hours before your flight to the time you finally reach your destination, assuming your flight isn't delayed or canceled. Whereas before 9/11, an economy class ticket on a long-haul flight like New York to Los Angeles usually included free checked and carry-on bags, complimentary meals, drinks, and snacks, and pillows and even a blanket upon request. Today, those things cost extra if they're available at all. Baggage fees alone are a $3.5 billion industry for U.S. airlines. And once you establish a revenue source like that, it tends not to go away, even when economic circumstances change for the better. If we flash back even farther to the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, air travel was a completely different experience, full of luxuries and amenities that are inconceivable today. Our parents remember when flying wasn't just a means to get from home to your vacation spot. It was an important part of your trip. People dressed up to get on an airplane. Granted, they had to breathe cigarette smoke throughout the cabin, and that must have been a horrible experience even for smokers. But for long-haul flights, your ticket usually bought you complimentary happy hour drinks plus a full meal service, including dessert. I looked at a couple of websites devoted to what air travel used to be like, and they showed chefs walking down the wide middle aisle of the plane with a huge food cart, carving meats and serving scrumptious meals to everybody. One meal menu I saw had baked Virginia ham as the entree, with glazed Pacific yams, peas au beurre, which means with butter, salad, luncheon rolls, a cheese tray, assorted drinks, mixed nuts, mints, and a fresh fruit bowl. The face of the menu announced that it was suitable for framing. I kid you not, befitting the memorable experience that air travel used to be. Tea and coffee were served in porcelain cups. Compare that to the tiny bag of chips and half can of soda that you get today.
Yeah.
First class was much more than a comfortable seat in the front of the plane. Lobster and caviar appetizers were available. In the 1970s, the upper level of a Boeing 747 served as a cocktail lounge and restaurant for first-class passengers. Continental Airlines had a full-service pub on some of its flights. Even the coach lounge on the lower deck was a large, airy space where you could stretch your legs or collapse into a cushy sofa. American Airlines famously had a piano bar in the coach lounge of its 747s, which it called luxury liners. It's a stark difference from the sardine can that is the coach section today. I'm going to post links to those websites I consulted, which include great photos of everything I just described so you can see for yourself. And now let's look ahead. As we discussed in the main body of my presentation, air travel's deregulated business model appears unsustainable, but there's an array of architectural, operational, and technological innovations either coming online now or well on the way that might make things a little less unbearable. I'm talking about things like smart airports using AI and data analytics to optimize their operations, the increased use of biometrics like fingerprint scans and facial recognition at self-service check-in and baggage drop-off kiosks to shorten wait times when checking in, or GPS tracking of luggage via Bluetooth so you can easily find your checked bag if it goes missing. Some of this digital and contactless technology was hastened by the pandemic. AI chatbots are already working on customer service, especially for frequently asked questions. Airports are also being rethought and redesigned to improve the customer experience, particularly abroad. I've not traveled to many foreign airports, but by all accounts, they're much better designed than here at home. Changi Airport in Singapore has amenities like movie theaters, swimming pools, and gardens. Asian airports have what the architect Moshe Safdie described as, quote-unquote, generosity of space that helps air passengers feel more at ease. It's slowly catching on in the U.S. with infrastructure spending focused on rehabilitating antiquated airports in ways that better balance passenger well-being, security concerns, and the imperatives of commerce. Some airlines are investing in upgrading seating options for premium customers, like lie-flat beds that can turn into private cabins for long-haul flights. At least one industry group, the International Civil Aviation Organization, is positively bullish about the future of air travel. They expect to see lighter, quieter, and more efficient aircraft outfitted with the latest in robotics and AI technologies, as well as a migration toward hybrid and fully electric planes using electric propulsion systems. When it comes to climate impacts, in 2021, the airline industry's trade group, the International Air Transport Association, pledged to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050 using sustainable biofuels and, quote, a combination of maximum elimination of emissions at the source, offsetting, and carbon capture technologies, end quote. There's a lot of skepticism about this pledge's chances for success, but the goal is to bring the industry in line with the temperature targets of the Paris Climate Agreement. In my research, I came across a short video from a futurist named Bernard Marr, who predicted that we'll see 6 innovations over the next few decades that will improve air travel for everyone. I'm curious what you think about this, Mark. I'm going to post Mars' video to our Facebook page if you want to check it out. One of his predictions is aircraft powered by either hydrogen combustion engines or hydrogen fuel cells, providing net zero CO2 usage with water as their only byproduct. He cites a recent report saying that they could be available as soon as 2035. In addition to the climate benefits, such planes would be capable of carrying hundreds more passengers per flight than existing planes.
I've also heard some speculation, I don't know how idle it is, that blimps might actually be brought back around as a way of engaging in long-term transit, like transatlantic flights by way of blimp, which has always struck me as an intriguing possibility. But then by the same token, the Hindenburg was this massive blimp that had actually a pretty small cabin.
Yes.
I think they only carried like 30 or 40 people.
Yes.
And it took 2 weeks to get across the Atlantic.
Yes.
So,
and we know how that story ended. Oh, the
yes,
humanity.
Ended with both a bang and a whimper.
Yes, right.
So I don't see how that would really be, like economically viable, how many people would really be on board with a 2-week blimp flight, aside from maybe just a one-time curiosity experience, because your entire vacation time would be spent in just a single one-way passage rather than the round trip you'd have to make.
Yeah, I must admit, I did not read about the possibility of blimps coming back, and maybe the story of the Hindenburg is just too much of a deal killer to ever sell people on the idea. But I hear what you're saying. It is kind of intriguing, and a 21st century blimp would undoubtedly be safer and larger than the ones that operated 80, 90 years ago.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, another of Bernard Marr's predictions is a blended wing design in which the wing and fuselage are combined into a single unit that lacks a tail. This is like aerodynamic design. There are already prototypes on the drawing board, and Marr believes they'd offer at least 20% more fuel efficiency than what we have now. I also read separately about research into the concept of morphing wings. Have you heard of this, Mark?
No.
They imitate the ability of living animals like birds and insects to alter the shape of their wings while flying. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. Definitely sounds cool.
Then there's futuristic cabin designs like double-decker economy and business class sections with more room for passengers and more capacity for the airlines. There's a cool illustration in the video of what that might look like. Fourth on Marr's list is an idea that sounds like something out of the Jetsons, but is closer than you think to realization. Ultralight, electrically powered air taxis that take off and land vertically like helicopters and thus don't require runways. Instead, they'd use helipads, roofs, or approved urban landing zones for short flights, which would divert some local transportation from the road to the air. So that's the value of that. A German company has already developed a 5-seater air taxi that reaches speeds of 300 kilometers per hour and is scheduled to start operating before the end of this decade, believe it or not. Marr claims that in big cities, traveling by air taxi could someday be as common as taking the subway.
Yeah, I have heard about air taxis. I think every now and then I see a headline claiming that air taxis are going to be the next big thing. Like this is the year that they're going to finally arrive on the market. And, it's always pushed out a little bit. I do wonder about the feasibility of aircraft takeoff and landing within residential areas, considering just how catastrophic an accident would be and that you would have a large number of flights, presumably with no, air traffic control, keeping track of every path. And so, what's going to keep them from running into each other?
Yeah.
But maybe smarter people than me have figured that out.
Well, I thought of that myself. And then that phrase I mentioned of approved urban landing zones. I think that's the answer. There will be these places where the vertical takeoff vehicles will take off and land. They'll be out of the way of the main bustling population centers,
Yeah.
And also to your first point about hearing about it, remind me of our fusion episodes 20 years away every time you ask the question, right? I tend to think this is probably not 20 years away. Unlike fusion, that air taxis are probably less than 20 years away. But following air taxis might be pilotless planes with autonomous flight systems relying on AI. Boeing has already been testing autonomous takeoff, landing, and taxiing as part of an effort to increase operational efficiency and reduce pilot workload and fatigue. With Waymo driverless taxis already ubiquitous on the streets of San Francisco, it's not as hard to imagine autonomous aircraft as it once was. Of course, providers will tout how they enhance air safety by reducing human error. And as with those Waymo cars, we'll have to make our own decisions about whether to trust the data and set foot in pilotless air taxis or airplanes.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. My wife shudders at the thought of ever being in a driverless car. A pilotless plane, I think she would be a definite no to.
Yeah. So the fifth trend Marr identifies is a return to supersonic air travel. So not a blimp, but the Concorde. The Concorde was retired back in 2003 for financial reasons after being banned by the FAA from flying over land in America because of the loud sonic booms it caused. But United Airlines and other carriers are investing heavily in a new fleet of supersonic aircraft that generate low-intensity sonic booms. They hope to have them in the skies by 2029. That's 5 years from now. The return of such aircraft would cut travel times in half for long-haul flights. The sixth and final trend is small bore compared to the others, but I think equally exciting. Better in-flight entertainment options, way above and beyond more reliable in-flight Wi-Fi. Get ready to see more screens, more gaming, immersive VR with headsets offering access to the metaverse, or AR headsets providing real-time information and even interactive experiences during the flight, like displaying historical information or identifying points of interest about the areas being flown over. British Airways has already introduced VR headsets for first-class passengers on some of its flights. There will be more wellness options like noise reduction and lighting that simulates the body's circadian rhythms for a more restful experience on evening flights. Incidentally, VR is also being used to train pilots, cabin crew, and maintenance technicians to troubleshoot problems. Until these innovations become available, how can we make things better for ourselves when flying? Well, I have one suggestion. One easy thing we can do right now is enroll in TSA PreCheck, the Transportation Security Administration's trusted traveler program that speeds up the security process at the airport by eliminating the need to remove your shoes and belt, laptop, liquids, or light jacket. As of August 2024, PreCheck had over 20 million members, which might sound impressive until you consider that the U.S. airlines carried around 819.3 million passengers domestically in 2023. My wife and I enrolled in PreCheck this year, and it definitely cut our wait times.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, we've been on PreCheck for years now, and it's night and day of going through the PreCheck line versus the regular line. Plus, you don't have to take your shoes off, which is a benefit.
Yes. And there are similar programs run by private companies like Clear that operate in airports and other places like concert venues and ballparks where large numbers of people congregate. It's not a panacea for all that ails air travel, but you have to start somewhere.
Yes, you certainly do. And it feels like the point where we're at now, we can only go up. So that first step would hopefully be in the right direction, and we could build from there.
Yeah.
It's It's the stuff that was too good to let it slide off the cutting room floor. Now it's bona fide. They've got the goods, yeah. They're turning the tide. In this bonus round, the truth's amplified. It's the bonus, baby, don't you miss this vibe. Extra tales and facts that didn't make the ride. Still so juicy, still so real. Two sexy guys with that bonus appeal.